All right, let's get right into it. We're breaking down Pfizer's latest quarter, and there's a fascinating story in the numbers. Revenue is down, but their profit forecast is up. So the big question is, how did they manage that? And more importantly, what does it mean for you as an investor? So here it is, the core puzzle of the quarter, right up front. You see revenue drop by a pretty significant 7%, and in the same breath, management turns around and boosts their profit guidance for the entire year. So what is going on under the hood at Pfizer? That's exactly what we're going to unpack right now. The short answer, it's really a tale of two Pfizers right now. You've got the one company that's moving past the pandemic, where all those COVID-related revenues are coming back down to earth, which we all expected. But then you have the other Pfizer, the core non-COVID business, and that part is actually showing some really impressive strength. Getting your head around that split is the absolute key to understanding this quarter. Okay, let's start with the top line number. Total revenue for Q3 came in at $16.7 billion. That's down from $17.7 billion this time last year. And as management was very clear about, this dip was almost entirely driven by the expected slowdown in sales of their COVID-19 products. No real surprise there. Now, this is where the story gets really interesting when you peel back the layers. Just look at the COVID numbers. Paxlovid revenue down a whopping 55%. The Comirnaty vaccine down 20%. But look at the other side of the business. The non-COVID portfolio grew a very solid 4%. And check this out. A powerhouse drug like the blood thinner Eliquis jumped 22%. This is the underlying strength that headline revenue number was completely hiding. And that underlying strength, that's exactly what gives management the confidence to go ahead and raise their full-year earnings guidance. They're now projecting between $3 and $3.15 per share. So even with all that pressure from the COVID products, the core business is just so profitable, and they're making smart moves that it's strong enough to lift the outlook for the entire company. So how exactly is management pulling off this pivot? How are they boosting profits while these massive pandemic-era revenues are fading away? Well, it all comes down to a really clear and deliberate playbook of strategic moves. And this strategy, it starts right at the top. The CEO, Dr. Albert Bourla, he put it plainly. He said the focus is on actions that provide, and I'm quoting him here, greater clarity for our business. This isn't just happening by accident. This is a very intentional, very focused plan being executed. And here are the three main pillars of that plan. First, a huge multi-year cost-cutting program to get leaner and more efficient. Second, they locked in a big pricing agreement with the U.S. government, which adds a ton of predictability. And third, they're making a major strategic acquisition, a company called Midsera, to jump into a very high-growth market. Let's put a number on that first pillar, the cost-cutting. This is not just trimming the edges. Pfizer is on track to deliver about $7.2 billion in net cost savings by the end of 2027. That kind of financial discipline is a massive reason they can raise profit forecasts, even when top-line revenue is shaky. And you're hearing the same tune from the whole leadership team? The CFO, David Denton, really hammered this point home. He said the quarter shows a continued focus on execution and financial discipline. Now, for an investor, seeing the CEO and CFO perfectly aligned like this on strategy and execution, that's a really critical signal. Okay, so management is clearly handling the present with tight cost controls. But you can't just cut your way to greatness, right? They're also placing a major bet on the future. This isn't just about playing defense. It's about aggressively shifting the company toward brand new areas of growth. And that next big bet is crystal clear. It's the multi-trillion-dollar market for obesity drugs. Pfizer is making a huge, decisive move into this space by acquiring Midsera, which is a biotech company that has a very promising pipeline of drugs in exactly this area. So let's break down the deal. Pfizer is putting some serious cash on the table, about $4.9 billion upfront, but it's actually structured in a really smart way. There's something called a contingent value right, or CVR, which basically means they'll make additional payments, but only if Midsera's drugs hit key milestones. It's a great way for Pfizer to pay for actual success while lowering the initial risk. Of course, no analysis is complete without taking a hard look at the risks. And for Pfizer, even though the strategy is clear, the road ahead has some pretty significant challenges that every single investor needs to keep on their radar. And the biggest immediate risk is actually tied to their biggest growth bet. The prize with Midsera is enormous, a real shot at competing in the obesity market. The problem? Novo Nordisk, one of the giants in the space, is now in a legal fight with Pfizer over this very deal. This lawsuit throws a huge cloud of uncertainty over the main pillar of their future growth strategy. And beyond that legal battle, there are other headwinds to watch. Can they actually execute on developing the rest of their drug pipeline? That's always crucial. Competition from generics and other new drugs is a constant threat. And of course, the regulatory world, especially pricing pressure from things like the Inflation Reduction Act, is always going to be a factor. So it all comes back to this. Pfizer is in the middle of a really complex but very clear pivot. They're managing the decline of their pandemic blockbusters with some serious cost control, while making a bold, multi-billion-dollar bet on the future of obesity treatment. So the critical question for every investor is this: will the payoff from new bets like Midsera actually show up in time before all these legal and competitive challenges start to eat away at the solid performance of their core business? The answer to that question is what will define Pfizer's next chapter.